Hello, welcome back to the Edge of the Box podcast, a podcast by WhoScored.com. I'm your host, Dan Bardell, joined by WhoScored's very own Dan Worth, and we've got Jonathan Wilson, who is well overdue a haircut with us as always as well. We're here to preview the weekend action and probably some other nonsense in between as well. And we're gonna, no Champions League. We're not starting with Champions League, Dan. No Champions League in the running order.
No, we wanted to start too early today, so we've not had time to get onto it.
I'll throw it in there. Jonathan. Chelsea, unsurprisingly, knocked out last night. Real Madrid probably playing in first or second gear throughout the whole two-legged affair. How did you see it?
I watched the other game.
Great start, unbelievable start.
No, I mean, I had it on a second screen, but yeah, the game was over from the first leg. It looked pretty half-paced. I know there was those two chances in the first half for Kante and Cucurella. But I mean, particularly once Real Madrid had scored, it was over. But that game was lost in the first leg. But Milan were very good against Napoli. They did what they've done. Really since January under Pioli, and January they're a bit leaky, but they've tightened up. And Napoli had a lot of the ball, but didn't really create any chances. And then Milan were very dangerous on the break. Giroud missed the penalty, had another good chance before half-time, as well as a goal he scored. So they could have been out of sight. So that goal that Napoli did finally score in injury time, that's the first goal that Milan have conceded in the Champions League since Aubameyang scored against them back in October. So do you know who the only manager to beat Milan in the Champions League this season?
Potter.
Graham Potter, twice.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I must have heard that last night to have known that. I
tweeted it, but yeah.
Maybe I saw it there.
Yeah.
I mean, but a nice little throwback though. Milan getting to the latter stages of the.
Milan derby in the semis is a great occasion. I mean, it was in 2003. I just started being a journalist then. That was. I think that game didn't finish actually in the end. I think there was crowd trouble and they had to. There's definitely a long stoppage. I can't remember if they came back afterwards or not, but. But that was when Serie A still obviously faded since its mid-90s peak, but it still felt like the top league in the world. So it's obviously not that standard. You'd fancy whoever wins the other semi, but yeah, Milan derby in the semi, it's a big occasion.
Potentially Milan derby.
Potentially, yeah.
Not done and dusted.
Not done and dusted yet. No.
That tie doesn't feel quite as cut and dry as Chelsea Madrid did with a 2-goal lead. To me, there's still potential that something might happen.
Even though the second leg's in Milan, I agree with you. Yeah. But Benfica, I was disappointed with in the first leg. They were not the team they'd been with Enzo Fernandez in the group stage.
No, Enzo Fernandez dragged last night as well. Wasn't having a great game, but Chelsea they were okay. I can see what the plan was, but when you've got Havertz up front, you need people going beyond him, and when the people going beyond him are Gallagher and Kante, I'm just not sure that's a feasible way to score goals. In all honesty, Dan, you enjoy the Champions League? I can't do two screens at the same time. I have to pick a game, and that's that. I can't watch two games at the same time, like Jonathan.
I don't really watch two. I watch one and I got the other one on. Just I'm kind of because I don't know. Somehow your eye's drawn to replays, so you see the replays. I don't know. Something in your brain must notice when it goes slower. So I don't really watch two games.
Dan, I think we did some Champions League predictions last week, and it was Kieran who was on. Who do you think is going to win the Champions League? I said Madrid. I think Jonathan said City.
Well, I mean, before this round, I was saying Napoli, so I'm glad that probably wasn't caught on this podcast. I think City, to be perfectly honest. It's about time that they won it, I think, and getting the 3-0 win over Bayern in the first leg kind of really proves that they're ready for it this season, I think. But last night I controversially watched the Championship instead. As a Reading fan, I'm monitoring that relegation zone with my full attention at the moment. So yeah, that's where I was last night.
Okay, that does make sense. The fact that you're a Reading fan and you watch the Championship and not the Champions League, that does make complete sense. Let's have enough of that then, and let's look at Arsenal against Southampton, the first fixture of the Premier League weekend on Friday night. We'll start with you, Mystic Jonathan. You said last week the Premier League title race was over, and that was before Arsenal dropped points at West Ham. So I assume you're going to stick with that prediction.
It's basically now comes down to that game next week. If Arsenal go to City and get something, then they can still win it, but they've still got the harder run in. And I think you're starting to see now the signs of strain on that squad. It's a small squad compared to City's. And I think you see the real drop off from Saliba to Holding, for instance. I think the way the last two games have gone, to be 2-0 up in both of them, there's slightly different situations in that. Going to Anfield is clearly different to going to a West Ham team who are battling relegation. Poor as Liverpool have been this season, but it's a similar thing where Arsenal were 2-0 up, seemed to be absolutely cruising, and then as soon as the tide started to turn against them, they couldn't react. And I sort of, if you think back to even that Fulham game, I know they won it easily in the end, where they were 3-0 up inside half an hour, but Fulham did get back into that game. And you sort of thought in that game, if Fulham had scored early in the second half, and they had the chances to do it, that could actually have been a bit twitchy for Arsenal. So I think it is something in the makeup of this team. If they get an early lead, they're maybe not quite sure what to do with it, whether they should sit on it or whether they should keep going. I mean, I sort of felt on Sunday that if Arsenal just kept going, they could have been 3 or 4 up in half an hour, and then the game would have been over. But at the same time, I heard people sort of saying, they should have racked up their goal difference. And whenever you hear that, you think something's gone wrong there. You heard it when Liverpool threw away that 3-goal lead at Crystal Palace. And everybody said, if they can get to 5 or 6 and they put pressure on City, you just got to win the game first. And Arsenal seemingly the last couple of weeks have sort of forgotten how to do that. And I think in both games, having got the lead, they tried to slow it down. I think that makes more sense to tactic at Anfield, where the crowd can't be such a factor. Whereas at the London Stadium, if they could have gone 3-0 up, if they could have put the game absolutely out of sight, so there wasn't just sort of one goal to get back into it, then you might have seen the stadium behave as it had in the defeat to Newcastle, which had been the previous home game, where there's a lot of disappointment, a lot of frustration, and fans leaving long before the end, and then you have won it. So I feel sort of both games they maybe misread the emotion of the game, and that is, I guess, is a thing that comes with experience. And as we know, it's not a particularly experienced side.
I mean, it's worrying to blow two goal leads in a week, isn't it, Dan? That's going to be very concerning for the Arsenal fans. They almost won't want to go 2-0 up against Southampton, although I do think they'll go on and win this game relatively comfortably at the weekend. But another worrying aspect was the fact that when it got back to 2-2, didn't really create anything. And I felt Arteta subs. I always think when a manager's throwing on a load of players and you've got all kinds of different players who don't usually start all on the pitch at the same time, which can happen with the 5 subs. I almost think you're better off not making the subs and sticking to what you know, because those subs didn't really impact the game at all. In fact, they probably made Arsenal worse.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think when he made those subs, they didn't really look like they were making any impact at all. They certainly didn't put West Ham under too much pressure. And I never really got the impression that when it was 2-2 that they were going to go on and win that game. In terms of Southampton, though, I think that game is probably the ideal one to have after throwing away two goal leads.
Yeah, if they could choose a team to play this weekend at home, I think it probably would be Southampton, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and you'd probably imagine that they will go 2-0 up. So it will be interesting to see what they do on this occasion. But yeah, I think you're right that they should blow Southampton out of the water, I think.
If Arsenal finish second, Jonathan, which is plausible now and has been plausible for a long time, can they still consider the season a success in your eyes?
I think so. I mean, yeah, it's possible for two things to be true. So they will have gained 20 points, 25 points more than they did last season. But that's it. You can't say that's anything other than a success. If you can add even 10 points to what you got the previous season, it's a success. Nobody thought Arsenal would be in a title race. Their aim for this season was to improve, and I guess even sort of the very summit of ambition was getting the Champions League. Well, they're going to do that. So in that sense, it's a success. But inevitably, it's going to be tinged with regret. I mean, we're assuming that they do go on to lose it. Maybe they won't, but I suspect they will. To be 8 points clear, albeit having played a game more, how often do you get that opportunity? And I think this maybe is a season where there are fewer challenges than there will be in the future. That I think the fact, even though it took City a little bit of time to work out what they're doing with Haaland, it gave a team that chance to get ahead. The fact that Chelsea and Liverpool have had such bad seasons, and you assume they'll be better next season. The fact that Tottenham have had such a bad season, albeit that they're constantly 4th or 5th, mystifyingly. Newcastle presumably will spend more. Yeah, if you think of financially, there's clearly a big seven. You can say the subdivisions in that. Yeah, Manchester United are clearly on an upward curve, and this was a season where of those seven, 6 of the others had problems. 2 or 3 of them pretty big problems. So Arsenal don't quite have the financial might of a City or even a Newcastle or certainly not Manchester United. Are they going to get that opportunity again? And I don't think they have to do much wrong. Yeah, if they play exactly the same as they have this season, next season, I suspect they get fewer points because I think the other teams will be better. So I think that will always hang over this season. That this was a chance missed. But you can getting to a final is a great thing in the story of a club, and this is the equivalent of that. You get to the final. If you lose the final, well, it's disappointing. It's a chance missed, but you got to the final, and that's the thing that should be celebrated.
Yeah, not many people had Arsenal in the top 4 at the start of the season with predictions. I don't recall too many people.
No, I didn't at all. I think I had them 6th. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm exactly the same. I think I might have had them 5th, actually. But yeah, not many people would have no one would have called them even being in the title race. But at the end of the season, when you've been top for most of the season, I guess if you're an Arsenal fan, it would be tinged with a little bit of regret and a little bit of sadness.
And the thing is as well, that it's not even that, I don't know, say they'd been in this position and then the last 2 games, I don't know, maybe they had 3 or 4 injuries. It had been a real struggle. Yeah, they hit the post a couple of times. The referee decision had gone against them. That hasn't happened.
No.
Yeah, they've been 2-0 up in both of them, and they've missed a penalty in one. So there's always going to be that sense of what might have been, and that's not that's an appropriate emotion, but equally, it's been a better season than they could ever expected. Is an appropriate emotion. Both of those things could be true.
Yeah, it's almost strange, isn't it? Because a team can sometimes finish second, but it depends on how you finish second. So if Arsenal had been in City's position and they were the ones doing the chasing and they just fell short, you'd say, they've had a positive end to the season, really unlucky not to win the league. They'll come back stronger next season. But because it's been them that's been the ones that have been top for the whole season, if they drop away, it's probably not looked at in the same kind of manner as being a success in some quarters.
Yeah, I mean, that order of points is a weird thing we have. I mean, I think you see that really obviously with, say, Brendan Rodgers' time at Leicester, that those 2 seasons when they finished 5th, the sense was of failure because they'd had Champions League qualification in their grasp and it had fallen away in the last few weeks. Whereas had the results been inverted, had the season gone backwards, and they'd had a sort of slow start, but they'd surged through at the end, you'd have been saying, what a great season. Yeah, they came within a game of getting Champions League qualification. They're on the up going into the Europa League. But we do filter things through the order in which they happen, and I guess that's unfair for 2 reasons. So one is not all fixtures are the same level of difficulty. That as Patrick Vieira found, if you play a load of big teams in a row, you'd have a run of bad results without necessarily doing too much wrong. Then somebody replaces you, has some easier games, and they're flying. But also, if you've got a smaller squad, as Arsenal do, as Leicester do, or did, obviously it's towards the end of the season that the fatigue and strain start to tell. So, I think we. Say you win your first 19 games of season and lose the last 19. Clearly, something's gone wrong in the middle of that season. But more generally, I think we should probably look at seasons in the round more rather than being taken by minor fluctuations of form.
Let's look a little bit at Southampton now, Dan. You've got their highest rated players so far, according to WhoScored this season. Who fits in where for them?
Well, it's no surprise that James Ward-Prowse tops the list. He's in at 6.94, which, below 7, so it's probably about right for Southampton's season, to be fair. And I think actually last night there was news articles saying that he's almost definitely leaving, which, to be fair, is not a surprise to any of us. But I think, should Southampton go down, which I absolutely think they will do, it could be a bit of a mass exodus for them, because although they have been pretty shocking this season, they do have a few players which are definitely Premier League quality and certainly don't really deserve to drop down to the Championship, and none more so than James Ward-Prowse, I think. A couple of youngsters as well that they've got, like Salisu and Bella-Kotchap. I think they can probably fit in to a lower Premier League team, maybe mid-table Premier League team, so they'll probably be looking to get out. But the main one is Lavia, I think. It's quite an interesting one. His average rating is 6.58, which, it is not amazing, but I think when you watch him, you can see that he's got bundles of potential. And I think he's already been linked with Arsenal, and he's only 19, so I imagine he's got a Premier League future. But as I said, it's going to be a super interesting one for Southampton, because when they inevitably do go down, it will be a completely different squad next season. And again, that means there's no guarantees that they'll be on the way back up, I reckon.
Jonathan, what would you say James Ward-Prowse's level is? So assuming he will leave Southampton regardless in the summer, but if they go down, I'd say he's definitely going to leave. What's his level?
It's probably Europa League level. I mean, that's a difficult thing to say, because I think once you get beyond City, I'm not sure there's a huge amount of difference in the next 6. I mean, clearly there have been this season, but if you're assuming sort of a fairly normal recruitment policies and non-crazy appointments, I think it's difficult to separate 2nd from 7th, really. So is he in that tier? Just possibly. I don't know. It's always difficult to tell with a player like that, because you don't quite know either how he'll respond to being, a slightly smaller fish in a bigger pond. That he's used to being the man everything revolves around. He's used to, I don't want to say his needs being catered to, because that makes him sound like a diva. And I nothing I've heard about Ward-Prowse suggests he is a diva. But what I mean is, if you're Southampton, you naturally play to your strength, and he is your strength. Whereas he would have to accommodate his game to others more at other clubs. And I don't think that's always an easy transition to make. I think it's possibly particularly hard for central midfielders who are used to kind of running everything. But I mean, clearly, his set plays are exceptional. That gives him that little advantage. Can he fit into a really sophisticated pressing system as you get at a big club? Truth is, we just don't know. People, coaches who work with him every day might have a better idea of that. I think for an outsider, that's very difficult to tell. Is he good enough for Manchester City? Probably not. Is he good enough for one of that next rung? Possibly. Could he go to a team who, realistically expect to finish 8th or 9th? Well, yeah, I'd say definitely. Would Newcastle make sense for maybe Liverpool? Clearly need to build in midfield. If Southampton to Liverpool is a well-trodden path. So maybe there is some sort of synergy about their approaches. And the fact that Ward-Prowse was there in the days of a lot of those players who did move to Liverpool. So there's opportunities there for that sort of maybe getting the Champions League level club. But I would say his natural level is sort of upper half Premier League without being right at the top of the Premier League.
Yeah, I would have said Newcastle, Liverpool, or Spurs. Perhaps if Spurs ever move away from their rigid 3 at the back system and went to a 4-3-3, for example, I think Ward-Prowse would fit in nicely there, depending on who the new manager is. He's a great player. Always been unlucky to just miss out on England tournament squads in the past few that we've had. There's a good player there, and like you said, the set pieces make him a very attractive option, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the set pieces, it's something that I think, because we now at the elite level, we talk so much about philosophies and about structure and about pressing and about keeping it compact. Set pieces are a way of sort of, I mean, I don't know how many goals Ward-Prowse has scored this season, 6 or 7?
I'd imagine so.
Let me have a look, shall I? But if you can guarantee sort of an extra 0.2 goals per game effectively, that's a really, really useful thing to have. Plus whatever assists, he's got 7 goals this season, in the league. Plus whatever assists he can create. And also there's that knock-on effect, which I think stats find hard to measure, which is if you're playing against a team that James Ward-Prowse is playing for, you don't want to concede free kicks within 25 yards of goal. So our defenders then slightly tentative making challenges of that. Does that lead to other chances? And I think you saw that, for instance, when Beckham was at his best, that people didn't want to concede free kicks within 25 yards of goal when they played Manchester United, and that created chances for others. So the free kicks thing, I think it's easy to overlook that, to sort of see that as an add-on, whereas actually it can be more integral than that.
Yeah, are you calling the Southampton no chance staying up as well?
I mean, it's very hard for them. I mean, it's an obvious thing to say. They're bottom and they're 4 points from safety with 7 games to go.
They really messed up, didn't they, with Nathan Jones? That was a period of winnable games, and they completely threw it away.
But what do they need? 4 wins would probably be enough. 4 wins would take them to 35 points, I think. Is that right? Yeah. 4 wins and a draw probably would be enough. 7 games to go. It's not totally impossible. I mean, their run is Arsenal, Bournemouth, Newcastle, away at Forest, which is difficult. Fulham, Brighton, and Liverpool. So it's not. I mean, it's not the easiest run in, but we've seen teams do it before. The end of the season could take on a bit of a life of its own. Fulham's probably not a bad team to be playing in there. Liverpool on the final day, if their season's gone to pot. I think Southampton at home in that game. So there's who knows what Brighton by the end of the season, they might have a cup final to look forward to. They might already know they're in the Europa League. If they're not going to be in the Champions League, they might rest players in that game. So the final 3 games of the season maybe aren't the worst. Going away at Forest the game before that, okay, Forest's home form is good, but Forest are a team struggling. There's pressure there. Even a point there might not be a bad result. So they're the favourites to go down, obviously, because they're bottom and they're 4 points adrift. But it's not impossible.
They stunk the place out last week. They pretty much stunk out the Premier League the entire season. Southampton, I'm going to make a big shout. I don't think they'll win a game again this season. I think they're gone.
I think they're probably relegated, but I've seen this twice for Sunderland coming back from positions that seemed impossible. When the season when Sunderland suddenly won at Old Trafford and won at Stamford Bridge and got a point at City and should have won that game at City. Yeah, from nowhere in the final 6 games of the season. So it does sometimes happen that teams just get momentum and inexplicably stay up.
Sunderland had defer though, didn't they? Southampton haven't got.
Not that season. We had Connor Wickham that season.
Oh jeez! Oh god! Yeah. Jeez, Connor Wickham. Forgotten about that. I just don't see it. I honestly don't think Southampton will win a game again this season. Sorry, Southampton fans. I don't want to be nasty. There's some big shouts on the pod last week that kind of both came true actually. So we'll see what happens this week. Let's have some score predictions then. Dan, what's your score prediction for this one?
I think it will be 3-0 to Arsenal.
3-0 to Arsenal. I'm going to go for 2-0 to Arsenal this week. They won't throw away a 2-goal lead. Jonathan?
Yeah, also 2-0.
Also 2-0. Let's look now at Newcastle against Tottenham. A big game in the top 4 race. Newcastle, you'd say, Dan, nearly there. Despite a bad result against Villa last week, they're nearly there. Spurs, I just don't know what they're doing, in all honesty.
No, I think Jonathan mentioned it earlier that it seems to be a myth this season that Spurs are even anywhere near the top 4 at the moment. It feels like they're losing every week, but are still there or thereabouts. And I think they're only 3 points behind Newcastle, although they have played one more. Newcastle, yeah, you're right. They look like they're almost there. And I'm not sure you can look into their game against Villa that much because Villa were just sensational. So I don't know if they'll be too well. They will be disheartened by it, but I don't think you should look into that too much. And I think being at St James's, this looks like a game that Newcastle probably should and probably will win, which in the top 4 race probably means Tottenham don't have a chance and that Newcastle secure it. So it does have pretty large implications on the top 4, I'd say. Yeah,
last week against Villa, Jonathan, I was there. Villa honestly were incredible, probably one of the best displays I've ever seen from Villa. So I don't think, like Dan says, I don't think Newcastle should read too much into that. But a win here against Tottenham would create some distance. And you expect them to win their home games nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, they've only lost 4 all season. I mean, that was the first. They lost 2-0 at City, but last week was the first. Other than that, it's the only time they've lost by more than 1 this season. So that was from both sides' point of view, a sort of a slightly freakish result that Newcastle were worse than they have been, Villa were better than they have been. So yeah, it shouldn't matter. But then it's not impossible Spurs could get a point here, or I mean, it could. I can't really see them nicking it, but it's. You could imagine if it's sort of goalless after an hour, there might be a bit of twitchiness there. Newcastle, a bit like Arsenal. They're not used to being in this position of having a thing to hold. Could there be pressure? I mean, there shouldn't be really, because I think they are comfortably one of the 4 best teams in the country, probably better than Manchester United. So they're probably one of the best 3 teams in the country at the minute. But it's not impossible that they could slip up. And Spurs do have this weird habit of getting results despite playing abysmally.
How far ahead are Newcastle, Jonathan, from where you expected them to be this season?
Well, I think I go back slightly. This is a bit of a coward's answer, but I am fundamentally a coward. But I think it's difficult to tell because so many of the other of the top 7 have had such bad seasons that I think Newcastle maybe are slightly better than I thought they'd be, but I also think that Liverpool, as they played last season, would have finished above them. Chelsea certainly should have pushed them closer than they have. Manchester United I know they're definitely on an upward path, but they've had a pretty in and out season, and yet Newcastle are only sort of keeping pace with them. So, I sort of thought they'd be challenging for top four, but maybe not quite getting there. And maybe they are slightly better than that, but equally they have been helped by others not really performing particularly well. I think there's little things in the side that now you can see a future where they will be regular Champions League qualifiers. So I think Isak has been better than I expected him to be. And I think that sort of gives them a real sort of elite attacking option that maybe they didn't have when it was just Callum Wilson, who I sort of think is a useful Premier League striker, but not quite Champions League level. So I think the impressive thing about Newcastle, it's partly that trajectory, but it's the fact that the team building has been pretty focused. They haven't really wasted money. It's very easy when we talk about money in football and the importance of money in football. And I realise this is a thing that people in my generation talk about a lot, because we remember what it was like in the 80s when there wasn't these huge divides. And you always get people going, look at Leicester, or look at how much money Chelsea spent and where they are now. It's not just about money. Well, it's not just about money, but money really, really does help. There's a massive correlation between where you finish at the end of the season and money. And what money gives you, it's not so much, you shouldn't look at it over one season. It's that money lets you make mistakes. So we've seen that with Liverpool, that they don't have the money of City, and they've just about kept pace for City. At least they've been able to challenge them, which is, given how good City are, is a remarkable achievement. But they only have to get a couple of signings wrong, and the thing looks a mess, and it looks over. And so, suddenly we're chasing Bellingham. Oh, we can't afford him, and the whole thing feels stale. It feels flat. It feels like golf is huge now. If you've got money, you can make mistakes. You can bring in players who don't work, and it doesn't matter. Chelsea have brought in players and made a lot of mistakes, and we'll see whether that matters with FFP and how things go next season. But Newcastle have got the money, but they've also spent it very, very sensibly. There's been a real targeted plan there, and there's a real balance to that side. And the danger when you suddenly get money, as they did, maybe there's less of a danger now with FFP, but you get a team where you've got, I don't know, 2 or 3 absolute world-class stars playing with, somebody who's come through the Championship and has played 2 seasons in the Premier League, and that gulf between players doesn't really work. Whereas I think Newcastle don't have that obvious divide. That Isak has come in. I think he looks a real quality player, but is there a massive gulf between him and Longstaff? Say no, not really. There is a gap, but it's not so big as to sort of be disruptive. So I think their team building's been the impressive thing. You sort of think, well, 3 or 4 more good signings in the summer, and they'll move up that level again. And given how good they've been at signing, you wouldn't expect those signings to disrupt them in the way that could some other clubs.
Yeah, I think what Eddie Howe's done that's so impressive, Dan, is that he's improved the players that were already there. The players like Sean Longstaff, Fabian Schär, players that hadn't really been any great shakes for Newcastle. He's improved the players there. He's kind of got that winning mentality and instilled it. They have bought pretty well, I would say, over the last 12 to 18 months as well. But the biggest thing, good defensively, I know they weren't last week against Villa, but across that whole season, they've done something that we didn't associate Eddie Howe with, in that they've been so solid.
There was no massive overhaul. I mean, albeit, they did make a few shrewd signings, which is to Eddie Howe and Newcastle's board's credit. But one of the strongest points that they've had this season is their defence. It's guarded quite nicely by the midfield too, but I think it was only this week where Pope was knocked off the top for clean sheets by David De Gea, which seems crazy, but I think he's had 13 clean sheets this season, which is pretty good, particularly, as you say, it's not necessarily an attribute that you kind of associate with Eddie Howe. And obviously, basics, if you don't concede, you don't lose. And that's proven the case for Newcastle. Just to jump back in on Jonathan's points, though, I completely agree with what he's saying. But I think Newcastle have probably just a little bit improved on my pre-season thoughts. But I think the most exciting thing about them, which I think Jonathan was saying too, is that they can kick on from here. And I think they're going to be a really interesting team to watch over the next, well, even next season, but next 2 or 3 seasons. If and when they do qualify for the Champions League, how far can they go? I think it's a really exciting prospect.
I've got to be honest, I didn't see them finishing top 4. I thought they'd probably be around 7th, maybe 6th. At a push Newcastle, I didn't foresee them being even challengers for the top 4, if I'm being perfectly honest. But I think the good thing about that for them, Jonathan, is that, let's say they were 7th, 8th, and they'd had another stable season like they ended last season. Potentially teams could come in and take Bruno Guimaraes and tempt him with Champions League football, because he's proved himself at the highest level now. But because of how good they've been and that accelerated progress, teams can't come in and take Bruno. Bruno's there and going to be a big player for them for years to come.
I mean, I'm sure if Manchester City wanted Bruno, he would go. But yes, the number of teams who could come in is significantly reduced. And also when they're looking to sign players, and this is a problem I think Liverpool are going to have as they try their rebuild, is, you know, assuming Tottenham don't get in and they're going to have to rebuild, it's a problem they're going to have. That, you know, you're shopping at Tesco, not shopping at Waitrose, because you've got your Waitrose players who want to play Champions League football. And if you're even something like Bellingham, do you want a year not playing Champions League football? No, of course you don't.
Not really, no.
Yeah, that's the highest level of competition you want to play in it. So yeah, you're reducing the pool of players and reducing the quality of players you can sign. And I think it's an interesting consequence of the fact there are now 7 financially big teams in England, that every year 3 of them won't get in the Champions League. I mean, I know there are certain possibilities where you could get 5 teams in 5 qualifiers for Champions League, but fundamentally it's going to be 4, so 3 of them are going to miss out, and that means that if you're a European player or a South American player, and you want a guarantee of Champions League football, do you then think, you know what, maybe I should join Dortmund rather than joining Liverpool or Tottenham, because at least Dortmund guarantees me Champions League football. I suspect the wages will be significantly lower, but those are 2 things you've got to play off against each other.
Yeah, I guess for these players as well, I guess the Premier League, luckily for teams like Liverpool and Spurs, if they don't make it, the Premier League is still such a big pool that you'd be able to get players in over the leagues, perhaps just by being in the Premier League and the nature of that competition. But are Spurs better off just not getting into Europe at all now, would you say, Jonathan? Because they're gonna need a rebuild. They're poor again last week. Losing to Bournemouth at home is not a good look at all. No disrespect to Bournemouth, but do they just need to not qualify for anything and just completely rebuild?
And I know even Europa League, it can feel a bit of a slog. But then on the other hand, you get to this time of year, and you know, Manchester United, I think, do want to win the Europa League, don't they? The game against Sevilla, they want to win on Thursday night. It's an exciting thing that you could be in a final, you could be winning trophies, and that's what it should be about. So yeah, I can see if Tottenham get into the Conference League or the Europa League and it gets to sort of October and they're having to go away to North Macedonia or Kazakhstan or wherever, and it feels a bit of a slog, that they might be thinking, probably be better off without this. But on the other hand, it offers a chance, come this time of the year, to be quite exciting again. And would you rather be slogging away playing for 6th again next season, or slogging away playing for 6th and with a European quarter-final to play? Well, you'd want the latter. I think it's a bit different for a team like Brighton, who've never been in those competitions before. Just getting in is massively exciting. But if they don't qualify, well, I think Arsenal have benefited this season from not having European competition, or being in the Europa League, not the Champions League. I think Newcastle have benefited from not being in European competition at all. That they have been able to keep players fresher, maybe have been able to prepare better for Premier League games. So there are some advantages, but I still think fundamentally, if you're a serious football club, you want to be in at least the Europa League.
And has this end of season been a wasted opportunity for Tottenham? Because I've got to say, I agreed with Jermaine Genius on Match of the Day last weekend, where Stiolini's just doing the exact same thing that wasn't working under Conte. He's not freshened it up at all. He's not even tried to change tactics or system. He's just wheeling out the same thing that his predecessor did And surprise, surprise, it's not working and it's stale and it's boring and Spurs fans are frustrated. Have they missed an opportunity by not bringing in someone who could have offered fresh ideas on an interim basis?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think when Stellini got the job, I actually said on here, like, here's his chance now to stamp his mark on management, go out there. Like, he's kind of got, there's kind of no pressure on him. He just needs to go out there and freshen things up. But he's giving off the impression at the moment that Conte's still in charge. He's just been sent off or something, and he's giving directions from the crowd. They're doing the same boring stuff, same layout, not creating loads of chances. And I think as a Spurs fan, you'd be massively frustrated that, the season is just going to peter out now, really. And you could have got an interim manager in, or even someone on a permanent basis that then would have this period of time to plan for next season, work out his best formation, etc., work out what needs to be done in summer. But instead, they've opted not to do that, and I think that it could potentially hurt them next season, because Stellini almost definitely not going to be there. So probably means that they'll have really to strengthen in the summer, which inevitably means with Spurs they'll probably start the season slowly, I'd imagine.
Have Newcastle just completely usurped Tottenham now, Jonathan? Are they going to stay there ahead of Spurs for the foreseeable, would you think?
Well, they've definitely got a chance to. I mean, Spurs' stadium is still it's the best stadium in the country, right?
Yeah,
I think.
Agreed.
That's a huge asset. It should generate revenue. I think the fact that it's chosen ahead of any other London stadium, other than Wembley for the Euros and as a potential host in 2028, I think that tells you the stature of it. I mean, I think that the selection of those stadiums is fascinating in terms of the shifting balance of power in English football. But at the minute, not at the minute, but if 10 years ago you'd said the 5 stadiums chosen for in England, where England are involved in a hosting bid, the 5 club stadiums chosen will be Villa, Newcastle, City, Everton, Tottenham. You'd be like, well, hang on, have the big teams all gone off to Super League and been banned or something? But by 2028, it could be. I mean, I don't think Everton will be, but the other 4, it's not inconceivable they are the Champions League. I mean, it's probably not Villa, but it's not impossible.
I'm steady on, Jonathan.
But certainly the other 3 could theoretically be regular Champions League qualifiers, and that's an interesting thing that it's sort of shifted away from Liverpool, Manchester United. I think in reality, Liverpool, Manchester United will still be very, very competitive. I think Arsenal will feel. I mean, when Arsenal built that stadium, when did it open? 2007, 2008, maybe. They would have thought that they would be the biggest and best London stadium, but it's just not now. So that is a huge thing for Tottenham. But the squad just doesn't match. And I almost wonder whether that's been a bit of a problem for them. They've sort of felt, right, we've got a world-class stadium. We need a world-class manager. And that's led them to go for Mourinho and Conte, who've been sort of seduced by the glamour of those names rather than getting people who actually were going to work and fit. I mean, I think it's premature to say Newcastle will absolutely, definitely supplant them, because we haven't seen Newcastle in Europe for, I don't know how long, a decade, maybe more. Let's see how they react to that. Let's see what happens when they do bring in more players. Let's see what happens if they do have a little wobbly spell. Do they decide to get rid of Eddie Howe? What happens then? Yeah, I think there's a lot of questions to be answered. But I think what's still exciting from an England point of view, or an English league point of view, is there are these 7 big teams plus Villa. And there's not many other countries.
And Reading.
There's very few other countries can say that. I think there's still massive problems with the financing of English football. I'd still think that we shouldn't have states owning clubs. But there are at least 7 teams. And you can't say, as there was the case 15 years ago, there's an obvious big 4 and they will always qualify for Champions League, and that wealth will self-perpetuate.
2006, by the way, the Emirates.
2006, sorry.
2006. Do you remember who scored the first Premier League goal there at the Emirates?
No.
I do. Olaf Melberg.
Really?
1-1 draw. Olaf Melberg was the first goal scorer at the Emirates. don't know what. That's the only reason why I remember it opened in 2006. I haven't looked it up. I just remember it because Villa played them in their first game there. Let's do the combined 11s then. Jonathan, we'll come to you first. I'm assuming yours is 10 Newcastle players and Harry Kane.
Yep.
I don't even need to do it anymore. Who are the 10 Newcastle players?
Well, the only problem was the forward line and how do you get Isak in and Kane. So I've stuck Isak out on the left.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
The problem with that is that you imagine they'd be drifting inside, and that means you're asking Dan Burn to overlap, which is non-ideal. So we might have to work on that a bit. But Joelinton can get forward from left side midfield. He has played that left wing role. So yeah, Pope, Trippier, Shaw, Botman, Burn, Willock, Guimaraes, Joelinton, Almiron, Kane, Isak.
I think that's pretty fair. In all honesty, this time last year, you'd have said Son not getting in a combined 11 of Newcastle and Spurs. Probably Kulusevski at this time last year as well. But Spurs.
Well, and if Bentancur were fit, I'd want Bentancur in there, but he's not fit, so I can't pick him.
Okay. What's the algorithm come up with then, Dan? I'm suspecting 10 Spurs players and 1 Newcastle.
No, it's not massively dissimilar, but there are 3 Spurs players. It's a 4-3-3, Pope, Trippier, Shaw, Botman and Burn. We've got Højbjerg instead of Willock, Guimaraes and Joelinton, Almiron, Kane, and Son is in our...
Yeah, not too dissimilar. Fair enough.
Yeah, Isak for Son and Højbjerg for Willock. Was it, wasn't it?
Yeah. I think it was very close with Willock as well. Ratings-wise, I think he's just missed out.
Højbjerg scored a few goals this season, if my memory serves me.
He had quite a good start to the season, to be fair. Him and Dyer are 2 players whose form I think has really dipped off for Spurs.
Yeah, I mean, how Dyer got in the last England squad, I have absolutely no idea. I can't for the life of me know what Gareth Southgate was contemplating with that because he's been bang off form for ages. Score predictions then. Jonathan, you'll go first.
1-0 to Newcastle.
1-0 to Newcastle. I'm going to go 2-0 to Newcastle. Dan?
I'm going to go 2-1 to Newcastle.
2-1 to Newcastle Spurs to score, and it'll probably be Harry Kane. Let's face it. FA Cup semi-finals as well this weekend. Let's have a quick look at Manchester City against Sheffield United. Now, it's a bit of an unwanted distraction for Man City, Johnson. I always think, they'll leave Rodri out for this game, they'll leave Haaland out. But actually, Rodri pretty much plays every game, and he probably won't leave Haaland out. Well, he'll probably just go full tilt and win.
Yeah, I just don't think a semi-final's ever a distraction. I know City have won loads, and whether this has been a successful season for them or not does not depend on the FA Cup. But if you're not going to take a semi-final seriously, don't even enter the competition. There's no point. And I don't think there's been any sign in the past that Guardiola doesn't pick strongest sides certainly for latter rounds of a cup. So, I mean, from Sheffield United's point of view as well, is it a distraction for them given that they're battling for promotion? I think possibly 2 or 3 weeks ago you might have said it is, but now they're 8 points clear with 4 games to go. So they are going to be promoted and deserve to be. And I don't think anyone here is as good as Burnley, but they have been a very, very good side this season. They have been very consistent. So no, it's not a distraction. I think it's very rare that a cup competitions are a distraction. I think it can happen for smaller sides battling relegation, and it can happen for smaller sides going for promotion. But realistically, you want to be in semi-finals. And both these teams, there's been no dip in form in the league recently, so no, it's not a distraction. In fact, it's from Sheffield United's point of view, it's a thing that they're playing for. If they get to a cup final, that's a massive thing for them. It's their first semi-final for 30 years, so they should go and they should enjoy it. They're obviously massive underdogs, but who knows? If they can nick it, it could be one of the greatest results in their history.
You say it's not a distraction to these teams, and I agree with you. You do always want to be in all the competitions. But we did see earlier on in the season that Newcastle, when they had the League Cup final on the horizon, it definitely changed them in the league a little bit. They did go on a little bit of a sticky, patchy run around that time, and they've recovered from it now. But that could have changed their season. They weren't picking up points around that point of the League Cup final. It kind of came at the wrong time in the end for them.
Well, it could have done. But at the same time, those 30,000, 40,000 Newcastle fans who in Trafalgar Square, was it a distraction for them, or was it the thing they were
they'd been loving life.
Yeah, if you'd said to Newcastle, would you rather win the League Cup or qualify for the Champions League, I'm sure they'd take the League Cup.
Yeah, it's the same for me with Villa. Villa haven't won anything since 1996. If I was offered top 4 or offered a trophy, I'd take the trophy every day of the week because I just want to see my team win something. And I'm sure it's the same for Newcastle. But it did. What I'm saying is, it did affect their momentum at that time in the league. And this brings us on to Brighton, Manchester United. I kind of feel with Manchester United at the moment, they're in 3 competitions still. They've obviously got a trophy already in the bag. The injuries are starting to pile up at the moment. The games are coming thick and fast, and they're back to Lindelof and Maguire at the back now. It does feel like it could have an effect on them finishing in the top 4. Now, ultimately, if they win the Europa League, it doesn't matter if they finish in the top 4 or not because they'll still get Champions League. But you see what I mean? Where sometimes it's not distraction's the wrong word. I don't know what the right word is. I'm not intelligent enough to come up with what the word on the spot, but it does have an impact.
Yeah, but I mean that's the nature of being good. If your squad's too small, don't be that good. You won't be that good. This is sort of a natural handicapping system that football has. That you can't just have 11 great players because fatigue will build up. You've got to have a squad if you're going to compete in lots of competitions. I've got no sympathy for teams that are going well in lots of competitions. That's what you should be doing. It's their job to get a squad that can cope with that. So I just hate the idea that it's this sort of very modern thing. Oh, the FA Cup's not really worth it. Well, if it's not worth it, just don't enter. Just don't play in it. Play your kids from the start. Don't mess about with it. It's FA Cup semi-final. It's a big day. It's a big occasion. And the moment it stops being a big occasion is the moment that football is ruined.
Brighton, Manchester United in the other semi-final. I've touched on it there, Dan. They're kind of back now to the defence that's been a failing defence for the last few years with Lindelof and Maguire. Got to a good start against Forest, keeping a clean sheet and winning that game, albeit I do think they were fortunate not to give away a penalty. But Martinez in particular, they've probably got used to Varane not being there at certain times, but Martinez being out for the rest of the season is a huge blow.
Yeah, it's massive. It's massive. And I thought in patches against Forest, the defence did look a little bit shaky, but they got the clean sheet, so that's the main thing. But I took a dive into some of the stats actually, and interestingly, in the Premier League, when Maguire plays, they're conceding just 0.7 goals per game, which is a lot less than when he doesn't play, which is 1.65, which I thought was astonishing. And they actually win more games as well. They've won 77% of their Premier League games when Maguire has featured, and only 47 without him, which massively took me by surprise. Whether or not that is all down to him or whether the rest of the players just have to try a little bit harder when he's in the squad, I'm not sure. But I certainly wasn't expecting United to be more effective with him in the side.
I suppose whilst they've lost 2 centre-backs, Jonathan, at least Casemiro and Eriksen have returned to the fray.
Yeah, and I think they've been big misses. I mean, there's that 10-game run where Casemiro was either getting suspended or being suspended or losing 7-0. And I think he's just a very, very good player, gives solidity there. Eriksen as well. Yeah, his distribution, I think that made a big difference on Sunday. That he wasn't meant to be starting the game, but sort of controlled the tempo of the game from midfield, having started. So yeah, the 2 of them back is a huge thing.
Brighton, I mean, they got to semis a few years ago, didn't they? Brighton, I think they just fell short in the semi-finals. But again, this is for them. They'll be delighted to be there because Brighton, in the last 10 years, their rise has been absolutely superb.
Yeah, and I was at the game against Chelsea on Saturday, and that's as one-sided the game as I've ever seen in the Premier League. They were absolutely. I mean, Chelsea were terrible, but Brighton were also absolutely brilliant. The press was really good. Caicedo was magnificent. The 2 wide players, March, but particularly Matoma, were both brilliant. The fact that Ferguson's injured is a huge loss to them and really disappointing for him. But Welbeck was the man who got the equaliser on Saturday, and he did play well. And Welbeck against his former club, there's a certain sort of romance to that. So yeah, I think this is Brighton. They're not just good; they're really, really good to watch. They're a really fun side. And pretty much every time they went forward on Saturday, they looked like, I think I 28 shots, which for the away team against a big 6 Premier League team is remarkable.
How good's Caicedo? Obviously, you were at the game live at the week, and how impressed were you with him? Because there's a chance he's going to be on the move in the summer.
Yeah, no, I think he's really good. I mean, I saw him the opening weekend when Brighton beat Manchester United. I was up at Old Trafford for that game, and he was noticeably brilliant in that game. And this keeps happening with Brighton, that you sort of watching the game, you think, who's that? He's brilliant. And then he's a 19-year-old from I mean, on Saturday it was a 19-year-old from Paraguay.
Yeah.
This is a 19-year-old from Ecuador. And you're like, how have they found him? I mean, Enciso was. I mean, De Zerbi ended up getting pretty annoyed with Enciso's lack of tracking in the last 20 minutes. But before that, he was sensational. Caicedo, I mean, he's almost the opposite. He's so mature and so disciplined and so diligent. And his reading of the game is so good for somebody that young. It's hard to believe he's only 19. He looks like a player who's been playing for a decade and playing at the highest level for a decade. So I think he's an incredibly exciting talent. And I think there is this sort of this new breed of midfielder. And I think Enzo Fernandez fits in that mould, where their tactical reading of the game is exceptional. Their capacity to win the ball back is exceptional, but they're also really good on the ball. They're really good at doing that sort of Luka Modric thing of just turning their body as they receive it, just to create a little space, create a little angle. He's one of those players who finds space. To say he's better than Brighton is unfair, because Brighton could feasibly be in the Champions League next season. Certainly should be Europa League next season. But you look at him and you think, no, he's a real elite level player. So Caicedo against Casemiro midfield should be a really good battle.
I mean, you talk of Luka Modric. He's rubbish. He gave the ball away 3 times last night. Absolutely disgusting. Absolutely disgraceful display from Luka Modric. Jonathan, I'm presuming Casemiro and Caicedo are in your team.
Yeah, it's not the easiest team to pick, actually.
No.
It's ended up being quite Brighton heavy, but that's largely, I think, because of injuries at United. So because I think you need somebody who can play the ball out from the back, I've gone for either Steele or Sanchez. I'm not sure what Steele's injury situation is.
Yeah, he missed the weekend, didn't he?
So he didn't play on Saturday, but I don't know if he will be fit. And he's been picked for his ball playing. But Sanchez played a couple of great pass out to Matoma on Saturday, so he's definitely better with the ball at his feet than De Gea is.
Well, that's the reason he's been dropped. Not
Yeah. No, I know that he thinks Steele's better, but still, so I mean, maybe Sanchez can only play that right to left pass, because that was the pass he kept hitting. So it may be that. But yeah, either the Brighton keepers or De Gea purely on ability with the ball. Now I've gone for a whole Brighton back four of Gross, who ended up playing right back, and I assume if Veltman's still out, will play right back. Duncan, Colwell obviously missed the weekend as well because he couldn't play against his parent club, and Estepinian, who was really good on Saturday. And then Casemiro and Caicedo at the back of midfield with Eriksen just in front of them. Then March and Matoma on the wings. And because United haven't got any fit centre forwards, you end up going for Welbeck. But sort of thinking there must be somebody better than that, but I'm not really sure there is.
Bruno can't play the weekend, have I imagined that?
Well, he'd be fighting for place with Eriksen in my team.
You've just chose Eriksen above Bruno.
Yeah, because either for your 3-man midfield, you want Casemiro and Caicedo, then it comes down to Eriksen or Bruno. I'd rather have Eriksen. And I don't like Fernandes wide. I'd rather have Matoma and March. So yeah,
Fernandes not out of the weekend. Then just me imagining it because you didn't pick him. That's the influence you have. That's the influence you have on that.
Maybe he is out of the weekend. I hadn't realised he was.
No, he won't be. It's just me making things up.
Right.
I think. Dan, what's the WhoScored team?
Yeah, it's a little bit different. Another 4-3-3 though, but De Gea in goal, Dalot, Maguire, Duncan, Shaw at the back. A midfield 3 of Fernandes, Casemiro, and McAllister, and then March, Rashford, and Matoma in the front 3.
Is Rashford fit?
It's debatable whether him or Shaw are available at the weekend at the moment. Right. They could be, but it's not definite. They're not definitely ruled out, I don't think.
Well, I might play Rashford through the middle if he is available, rather than Welbeck. But Matoma definitely gets in the left.
Leave Welbeck in. To be fair, I've actually always rated Welbeck. I think he's a good player. I think he's useful. He's always popped up with important goals over the years when he's been fit for Manchester United, for England, for Brighton, for Sunderland even at times, as I'm sure you'll remember, Jonathan. Not for Watford, though.
Team that won 3-0 at Stamford Bridge when Ledder scored the brilliant goal.
Let's finish then with the just a minute section, and you really
we're not doing predictions for the semi-finals.
Nah, forget that. We're not.
Okay.
Our predictions, as I say every week now, are just pointless because of Ben's laziness. Couldn't be bothered to do a league table. It's took away the fun and the jeopardy of the predictions. So I'm gonna make a stand against WhoScored and not do semi-final predictions this week. What's the point? So yeah, quick fire previews to finish. Just a minute, and it really is going to have to be just a minute because we are well over the clock. Jonathan, you've got Fulham against Leeds.
Yeah, I mean, Leeds, although it's gone really badly recently, just before half-time in the Palace game, which is, only 2 games ago, everything looked fine for them. They'd won 2 of the previous 3. They were 1-0 up. They were totally on top. And then suddenly they let in 5 goals and they lost 6-1 to Liverpool. And suddenly, there's panic there. There's people saying Javi Gracia's not cut out for it. So it might actually be good for them to get away from Ellen Road, to get an away game. Bamford's a doubt for them, and there's doubts and Dallas and Adams are both definitely out. They have only won 2 games away from home all season, though, which is a problem for them if the Ellen Road crowd has turned. Fulham, after 5 straight defeats, did Leeds a favour by beating Everton last week. Mitrovic still suspended for them. Sorry, James, Kazawa and Nelson Escobar are all out. Fulham won this one 3-2 at Ellen Road early in the season. But if we are still doing predictions, I don't know if we are. I'm confused about this.
We are for this.
I've got Fulham to win this by 1-0.
I'm going to go for 1-1. Dan?
Yeah, I'm going to go 1-0 Fulham as well.
1-0 to Fulham. Dan, you've got Crystal Palace against Everton, Yannick Bolasie derby.
Nice. Crystal Palace coming to this game having won all of their last 3 in the Premier League, scoring at least 2 goals on each occasion. They look a completely different side since Roy's return, and they'll be hopeful of continuing their form against Everton. The Toffees' initial bounce after the appointment of Dyche seems to be petering out with only 1 win in their last 8 in the league. They are currently outside of the relegation zone, though, but by the skin of their teeth, and thanks purely to their goal difference. Palace will remain without Zaha, who isn't expected back for at least another week. The same can be said for Guaita. Klein is also set to miss out for the hosts. Everton will be without Townsend, who is still out with his knee injury, and Doucouré is still suspended. Coleman is also out for 1 more week. But this game might see the reintroduction of Dominic Calvert-Lewin, which will be a big boost for Everton, he is obviously on the cusp of returning from his thigh injury. Palace seem to be on fire at the moment, and I think they will probably add to Everton's misery. So I'm going to go for a 2-1 win for Palace.
Jonathan?
1-1.
1-1. I'm going to go for 3-1 to Crystal Palace. The Stan Collymore derby for you, Jonathan, is Liverpool against Nottingham Forest.
Probably a bigger game for Forest. They're third bottom, but they are level with Everton. They're certainly not cut adrift. But they have only taken 3 points in the last 10 games after that good run where it looked like they were getting away from relegation. But January signings there seem to have complicated things, if anything. And having Steve Cooper having just sort of worked out his squad, worked out how he's going to play, I think his thinking has now become confused. The big problem is scoring goals. They've only scored 8 in their last 13. And their away form is dreadful, only taking 6 points on the road. Liverpool, much, much better at home than they are away. They're 8th at the moment, so they could still get Europa League, and I guess that probably is more worthwhile than being in the Conference League for them. They were very, very good at Leeds, admittedly against poor opposition on Monday night. But they're in the strange position where 22 of 56 goals they've scored this season have come in just 3 games. Players are returning from injury. Diaz could be back. Bajicic and Keita are the 2 out. Forest got 9 players out are doubtful. Forest won it 1-0 at the City ground, but I think Liverpool will win this 2-0.
Yep, exactly the same. Liverpool 2-0 for me. Dan?
I'm going to go 3-1 to Liverpool.
3-1 to Liverpool. And Dan, you've got the Steve Claridge derby, Leicester against Wolves.
Yeah, Leicester remain in free fall and have now only picked up 1 point from the last 27 available. Most recently on the receiving end of a 3-1 defeat to Man City. The Foxes occupy 19th position, just 2 points above Southampton, who sit rock bottom. Wolves have won their last 2 in the league, winning 0 on both occasions against Chelsea and Brentford. WhoScored's calculated strength for Wolves is holding on to leads, as they have done in their last 2, and you can expect them to do the same here if they are to take the lead against Leicester. Leicester will be without James Justin and Ricardo Pereira, but could welcome Harvey Barnes back to action. Neves will return for Wolves, and Diego Costa looks like he could feature here too after recovering from a knee injury. When these sides met in October, Leicester managed a 4-0 victory over Wolves, and they'll be hoping they can replicate that this weekend, if not the scoreline, at least the result. But I think it's going to be much tighter than that, and I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw.
I'm going to go for 2-0 to Leicester, a Dean Smith masterclass. Jonathan?
1-1.
Jonathan, huge game, the Scott Hogan derby, Brentford v Villa.
So Villa had that run where I thought the new manager bounce had worn out, and they had the 3 games in a row where they let in 4 against Leicester, 3 against Manchester City, 4 against Arsenal. Lost all of those games, conceded 11 in those games. And since then, they've won 7 and drawn 1. And I think the key thing, although Ollie Watkins' goals, he's got 11 this year, although his goals have clearly been hugely important to that. But the key thing has been the defence has tightened up. They've kept 6 clean sheets in those 8 games. So they're only 3 points off Spurs. I think definitely overhaul them. Newcastle might not quite be in range, but then if Newcastle do slip up, if they do tighten up on the running, then maybe they are, given how well Villa are playing. Brentford certainly should be beatable. They're down to 9th, no win in the last 5. They've had 3 defeats in a row. Manchester United, Newcastle, maybe understandable. Wolves, less so. Janssen and I out for them. Cash, Coutinho, Kamara and Bailey out for Villa. Villa won at 4-0 at Villa Park, but I think it'll be tighter this time. I'm going to say 1-1.
1-1. I'm going to have to go 2-1 to Villa. Villa doing everything well under Emery at the moment. Dan?
I'm going to go 2-0 to Villa, I think.
2-0 to Villa, although Villa have a horrendous record at Brentford. I don't think they've won at Brentford since 1947, although I can't imagine they've played too many times since then, in all fairness. I've got absolutely no derby for Bournemouth v West Ham, Dan, but that's your game.
Jermaine Defoe.
Oh, obvious. Come on, be better. Do better.
The Cherries have won 4 of their last 6 in the Premier League and look to have turned a corner recently. A very late winner against Tottenham at the weekend gave Bournemouth a precious 3 points there, which has seen them moved up to 14th place. Now 6 points above the drop zone. West Ham sit 1 place and 2 points behind Bournemouth in the league, but do have a game in hand. They come into this game after clawing back a draw against league leaders Arsenal, bringing back a 2-goal deficit to snatch points. And the Hammers did win the reverse fixture against Bournemouth 2-0. The visitors will be without Jean-Luc Scamacca, but could welcome back Aguerd and Ogbonna from injury. Bournemouth will be without Traore, Fredericks and Junior Stanislas. Both teams are trying their hardest to keep themselves away from the dogfight of relegation. And this looks like it will be another tight encounter. But I think West Ham will be buoyed by their results against Arsenal and might nick this one 2-1.
Yeah, 2-0 to Bournemouth for me. Jonathan?
1-1.
1-1. I didn't realise Junior Stanislas still played for Bournemouth because I was about to say I missed Junior Stanislas for the derby. I can't believe he's still at Bournemouth. And that does us for this week's edition of the Edge of the Box podcast. Do subscribe with your post notifications on so you know exactly when our next show is coming. I do believe that we're doing Wednesday next week, straight after the big game in the Premier League of Manchester City against Arsenal. So yeah, subscribe to the channel and you'll know exactly when that's coming. Thank you to the chaps for joining me. Leave a comment and give the video a like as well. Enjoy all the football at the weekend as we always do, and stay safe.